Welcome to this special edition of Story Hour in the Library. I'm Dave Dewar. I'm the Development Director for the University Library here at Berkeley. Story Hour is a monthly prose reading series that's hosted by the University Library from September to May, 5 to 6 p.m. in this room or across the hall in the Morrison Library. And these somewhat, modest surroundings, I guess, really belie the exceptional talent of the readers who spend time answering questions, signing books, and having those meaningful discussions with a lot of students who come to these things, which is great. The readings are free and they're open to the public. We actually have the poster for this year's series in where you're having dinner, so you can take a look at it. But it's my pleasure to welcome a few of our former readers who are here tonight. We have Clark Blaze. Clark. We have Bharati Mukherjee. We are supposed to be having ZZ Packer, but she was on a flight in from New York, so she's always late. Okay. It was snowing in New York, Janet says. Okay. And we have Daniel Mason. And of course, we have Michael Chabon, who reads several times for us, but thank you, sir. And I'm also pleased to be able to introduce one of our upcoming readers for the 2009-10 series, whose first novel, Pictures at an Exhibition, was just published last month, Sarah Houtling. Who I can say is now officially, she and Daniel are fiancés, so that's good. Isn't that lovely? The library also hosts another reading series, Lunch Poems, now in its 13th season, offering monthly readings the first Thursday of the month at noon, of course, during the school term in Morrison Library. Information on both Lunch Poems and Story Hour is at the library website, and it's also across the hall. You can see it. But I want to offer one additional acknowledgement for a gentleman who has really been a force in the founding of both of these reading series, who's gained a great deal of literary distinction, and who tends to stand up here and thank a lot of us for all the work we do. But this time it's Turnabout Fair Play. I know him principally as one of the foremost teachers at Berkeley, Mr. Robert Hass. Thank you. I have to do that. It's only fair. Story Hour tonight is being webcast, meaning that people can view this program as it's happening. It also means that in probably 2 weeks, it will be on the UC Berkeley webcast site, which is cleverly titled webcast.berkeley.edu and listed under the events section. And if you wish to watch it again, or you can tell your friends about it. Tonight's special edition is sponsored, so the commercial comes, by the Campaign for the University Library. This is a means to bring the public's attention to the campaign to strengthen our research collections. This, of course, as you may know, is one of the finest research collections of a university in the country and the world. And also, we're revitalizing and renovating the Moffett Undergraduate Library, where many of our undergraduates live their whole careers here. And it's time, after 40 years, to get rid of the avocado and harvest gold color scheme. Many of you are well aware of how important the library is to the Berkeley campus, and indeed, as we say, it is the heart of the university. The university library not only includes Doe Library, you're in it, the Gardner Stacks, the Moffett Library here at the campus center, but also many of the specialty libraries in all of the schools and colleges. Heading this system at Berkeley is our university librarian, Tom Leonard.
Thank you, Dave. You may already have felt the stunning optimism that sort of surrounds libraries. It's stunning because you walk in through the classical motifs, sort of remembering that all the libraries of antiquity crumbled and most of their collections were lost. You may also notice that every day here, people walk out with thousands of dollars worth of our collections in their backpacks and with our trust. And even when you think about our collections, that's optimistic too. We collect in science and engineering, discoveries, not the kind of lessonless failures that do occupy human beings. And when it comes to memoirs, one thing I've noticed, though we collect them from all corners of the world, none of them could fairly be summarized as my humble origins and how I totally failed to overcome them. For that sort of theme, indeed, to escape the limitations of that kind of optimism and to find larger truths, we turn to literature. And that's why Story Hour is so important to the library, and why we welcome it, and will continue to welcome it all spring. It is a delight as university librarian to welcome that side of the writing and storytelling and truth-telling enterprise. The host here is really Michael Chabon, and I'm about to welcome him. You got an invitation that in print explained to you, if you needed a reminder, his distinguished works, and also gave you a reminder that he is one of the most talented American writers of his generation. I have some sobering news, though, for Michael. Since you last appeared here, one of your accomplishments, that is that 5 of your stories, as I count them, have been made or are being made into major films. That accomplishment sort of was put in a different context when we recently acquired the papers of the science fiction master Philip K. Dick, another Berkeley writer who used this library. We've kind of given up counting the films that were made from Philip K. Dick stories. So, Michael, you have a long way to go. Michael Chabon.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm very delighted to be here this evening. I have the honor to serve on the advisory board of the libraries, and I'm very honored to hold that position and grateful to have been asked to do that. And this is a chance for me to just repay the library for having bestowed that honor on me. We're here sitting tonight in one of the world's great libraries. And I know that because I've actually been to every library in the whole world. And this is, there are 5 great ones, and this is one of them. You heard about Philip K. Dick. I was just talking to Daniel Mason before we came in here this evening, and in the course of talking about his work and his research on his work and what he's working and doing on, he happened to mention this book that he needed, and he said, and I could only find it here in this library. I've done so much work, starting with The Amazing Adventures of Cavalier and Clay, which I was still working on when I moved to Berkeley. In this library, I have made so much use and continue to make so much use of my work of the libraries that I have this very close personal connection to this library, even though I did not go to Cal. And so far, none of my children has gone to Cal, but that could change. We're here for Story Hour, and Story Hour is a wonderful program which I have participated in a couple of times already. But we're also here, as Dave mentioned, to just remind everyone about the program of improvement, of expansion that is currently going on here at the library to expand the research collections, to bring them, I mean, they're already great collections, but this university is at the cutting edge of so many fields of research. And if you live in Berkeley, if you spend any time in Berkeley, you know, I mean, you just have to sit in a cafe and eavesdrop. Well, I eavesdrop on the people sitting at the next table, and the stuff that people are doing here, the stuff that people at this university are working on is always just right out there at the very outermost edge of everything. And the library is right there supporting them in those researches, but needs to continue to be there. And then there's the question of the undergraduate library, and I'm just living, walking proof of the damage that can be done to someone when they are exposed to too much avocado and goldenrod. I grew up in the 70s. That was the color scheme of our kitchen, and it was not a good thing. It was the substitute in my case for all this. I mean, I didn't take as many psychotropic drugs as Philip K. Dick. And that's probably why they haven't made as many movies out of my books yet, but all I had was avocado and goldenrod. So don't let that happen to the children of the future, please. Thank you. Now it's my pleasure to introduce the two gentlemen who are going to be sitting with me here tonight. The first is Robert Haas. His great-grandmother is one of 3 survivors of the Mountain Meadow Massacre. He once won a swimming race with a timber rattler in a lake in the southern Sierra, and he invented a new meter, the Sydenham dactylic. He's also a poet. Robert Haas. I took the middle seat. And our other guest this evening invented a new breed of spaniel, the Sydenham Spaniel. With Stan Dragland, he invented and designed a new form of hog feeder. This is all true. And he has the distinction, after his first novel was published, The Collected Works of Billy the Kid, it was attacked by the former Prime Minister of Canada, Michael Ondaatje. Oh, he's also a fiction writer and a poet.
So the idea is to have a conversation. I did want to say at the outset thank you to Tom and Dave for making both the lunch poems and story hour happen. This is a true story. I got this morning an email from a graduating senior at Yale University who said to me, wrote to ask me about something, and he said, I grew up in the Ozarks, and when I was a suicidally alienated freshman, I found my way to the lunch poems on the web, and my education for the 4 years of high school consisted of seeing the poetry readings, monthly poetry readings coming from the University of California. And this is because Dave and Tom did this thing, that this place can be, not just for the students here, but for the world, a resource. It's a wonderful thing. Cal's a public university. This is a place for raw talent. The kids we teach are raw talent. And the idea of making this place completely alive to them, culturally alive to them, not dead, but a place in which everything that might be interesting in the culture is happening. The process with with Moffett Library down the way has been, which sits right in the middle of the campus and has a wonderful cafe called the Free Speech Cafe that everyone goes to and is emblazoned with the things that Mario Savio said brought down the administration of the university in that time, and brought them right back up again and made this place powerful. We're in the process of trying to reimagine, trying to figure out what the best possible kind of place to study, learn, and do research together and apart in film, in all the media, the way to use computers and the way to use books in the 21st century, and to make this the best possible place to do it in. It's an incredibly noble and useful enterprise. It's a great bet on the future to be in the company of Dave and Tom and the people who are trying to reinvent this place. So I'm very grateful to the two Michaels to be here. I wanted, while we're here and talking about Berkeley and talent, to acknowledge that we often have lecturers among us, visitors, and we have with us as a visitor one of the great novelists of the world, who's visiting us by way of Cape Town, the Somalian novelist Nuruddin Farah, who's going to be giving a set of 3 lectures. Thank you so much for being here and for coming. So we were thinking about what would be fun, and I've been rereading Michael's and Neil's Ghost, which I had read once, and I'm reading through and we thought we might just kind of talk about influences for a while. And I was going to ask you about the character, this time, not that I wasn't struck by it before, but I think you guys share the ability to make characters who are utterly memorable. And one of the characters who leaps out at me this time is Palipana, a blind archaeologist, a blind native archaeologist of a place that colonial archaeologists have done a lot of work in, living like a monk at the end of his life with a blind and with a young woman, niece. Yeah. Where does he come from?
Well, strangely, he's one of the few characters who actually was slightly based on someone who was an archaeologist, and he was very respected. And towards the end of his life, he started to fictionalize his discoveries because he thought the only way he could find the truth was to start imagining what happened in the gaps. And he, in fact, was found out by a young student who was blind. So I thought no one's going to believe that. How can a young student detective who's blind, find this out? So, but there was very little information on the guy, and he was actually quite a beautiful writer. But it is a totally fictional creation, and I sometimes get into trouble by taking a minor unhistorical person who I want to make historical in some way, and then get into trouble because people are upset about this. But most of the time, the characters in my books are not based on real people. I find I'm limited in that way if I do decide to model this person or that man or woman on a certain person, because then you are limited to that person. So I begin with very, very few, with almost nothing known about the characters when the book begins, and then gradually it's all like bringing little bits of information to the character or a character trait to that person, and they get built up as you go along. So the books tend to begin with very little. I just I need a location and a time, and that's about it. And then gradually, there are 3 people on a farm in Petaluma, and then gradually they kind of become real people to me.
One of the characters that your character put me in mind of, not in its specifics, but in the myth figure of the wise old man, was the guy in Kipling's Kim. And it made me think about adolescent reading and writers. Do you think about echoes when you get going?
Well, I think once I'm actually working, I sort of don't realize that I've kind of ripped off some novelist that I read, Enid Blyton or someone like that. So someone will say, "Did you realize that?" I think you told me when The Visitor there was a Jack London novel that began with a guy coming down a hill on a horse, and there was a fire. I thought, I haven't read this novel, so I can claim that now as an influence. No, I think certainly, Kim was a very important book to me, and it's a wonderful book still. I love the edition which has an introduction by Edward Said, where he says, "This is a terrible book, no, but it's a wonderful book." No, it's a terrible book, and he's battling away with himself and his arguments about what's wrong with the book, but also it's one of those great adventures.
I read it aloud to 2 of my children, each of them twice, and one of them ended up going off to India and bicycling down the Marabar coast. So you have to be careful when you read to your kids. We were talking about myth and character, and do you mind saying a word about this recent assignment that has fallen into your lap?
No, I can talk about it. I'm allowed to mention it. I just got hired to do a rewrite of a film version that's being made of the Mars books of Edgar Rice Burroughs, the John Carter of Mars books, which are still very much in print and have been read and enjoyed continuously since 1912, but have never been filmed before. There have been many attempts over the years, but
I was saying to Michael that in one of my aunt's summer houses, I had an English uncle, and who the family brought from Liverpool to an almond ranch up in the most godforsaken counties in California, only a Bible and the collected works of Edgar Rice Burroughs. And so I devoured these novels when I was. How many of you have read the Mars novels? They're part of your childhood
we're going to have
reading.
to get those numbers up.
It's never too late to regress.
No, they're so much fun. They're so much fun. And he's one of those writers like Robert E. Howard, who, he was not necessarily the greatest writer in the world, and his prose style can be kind of wooden, and his dialogue's terrible, but he really believed what he was writing. You feel that he was seeing everything he's describing to you, that he was there, he's on Mars, and that the vividness of his credence in the lies that he's telling is that's what really keeps those books. They're still juicy. There's still a lot of juice in them, even though they're dusty on the surface.
So, a lot of it's clear that genre fiction has been an excitement, inspiration for you. Did you start as a teenager? Did you read highbrow books and then get to genre, or?
Well, sort of. I loved, when I moved out of children's literature, reading kids' books and started reading stuff that was for older readers, I read a lot of genre stuff, a lot of science fiction, a lot of fantasy and horror and that kind of stuff. But I was simultaneously reading stuff that was supposed to be good for me. But I was very fortunate in that my parents are both very avid readers, and my dad in particular kind of loved books indiscriminately. So he would press, maybe tell me I had to read Franz Kafka, and at the same time tell me I had to read Edgar Rice Burroughs or Isaac Asimov, and he didn't really make those kind of distinctions. It was, if it was good, it was good, and if you love it, you love it. And so I think from a pretty early age, I had the idea that I just wanted to write, and I wanted to write things that I loved. Basically wanted to write books that I thought I would love to read.
How old were you then?
13, 14. I really started with Sherlock Holmes. That's where it really started for me. And I didn't know that wasn't great literature. Actually, I think it is great literature in the case of Holmes. I just thought it was wonderful stuff.
Yeah, before I came to Canada, to North America, the books of the versions of North America I had were Damon Runyon and the Coasters, their songs. And I wondered what I thought North America would be. Was it a place where Tom Waits was president? It was possible. But I think music was a huge influence on me, actually, in some ways, more than books, I think. And it was mostly popular music, and then jazz, the Louis Armstrong's Hot 5, Hot 7 albums. They were just central.
When did you first listen to those?
Jazz? I listened to jazz in England when I was about 14 or 15. I used to go to all the jazz clubs all the time. And I just go there and dance like a maniac, really.
Just for the story, you left Sri Lanka when?
When I was 11. And then went to school in England, and I was there till I was about 18, and then came to Canada.
And you started listening to American jazz?
I listened to American jazz. And what you heard was British jazz doing American jazz, like Chris Barber and Humphrey Littleton and people like that. But so I knew the source was somewhere else. And when I discovered Louis Armstrong and the Hot 5 and the Hot 7, they were just magic to me. They were just the greatest art in some way.
It is the greatest art.
Yeah.
This would be a great story. The American jazz scene in London in the 1950s. Philip Larkin's writing.
Yes, the appalling Philip Larkin's writing all kinds of stuff. But no, and I think jazz has kind of been very important to me. Even the aesthetics of jazz. When you read someone like Miles Davis saying, I listen to what I can leave out. That to me is a principle, a very great principle when you're a writer or a poet as much as a musician. And music was certainly one of the things that influenced me, I think.
I'm trying to write something about Edgar Allan Poe, whose bicentennial of his birth is this year, and seems like Lincoln and Darwin are getting all the bicentennial attention. But Poe was one of my favorite writers from the time I was very young, and I went back and reread the narrative of Arthur Gordon Pym, which I hadn't read since I first read it, maybe when I was 14 or 15, and I had no memory I knew I'd read it, but I didn't remember much about it, except there was cannibalism in it, and that was kind of it. And the Antarctic, I knew it had something to do with the Antarctic, and I kept having these experiences reading that book of things that in the Amazing Adventures of Cavalier and Clay has an Antarctic sequence in it where one of the characters goes to the Antarctic, and just whole ideas that I lifted right out of the narrative of Arthur Gordon Pym, but I didn't remember they were in that book at all. Just he's sealed up in this crate. He's stowing away on the ship, so that's like the opening of Cavalier and Clay. The character's in this crate, and he's overcome by the fumes of whale oil and all these other noxious substances in the hold of the ship, so that he swoons for days on end, and he's about to die, and this dog comes. His faithful dog that he didn't even know had also stowed away on board the ship comes and starts licking his face and wakes him up, and I just completely stole that in Cavalier and Clay. I have this dog, this character who's wakened by when his dog responds to the fact that there's been a gas leak and everyone's killed in this Antarctic research facility except for the main character and his favorite dog, who wakes him up, and they get outside to fresh air. So, I mean, influences can be so, I guess I would have said Poe was an influence, but I wouldn't have ever been able to say so completely, precisely how.
So were either of you influenced by other art forms as well as literature and novels and poetry? Were you, Bob?
I think we were all formed by movies and music, right? Everybody was, I think.
Well, I know that you have an obsession with Busby Berkeley, for instance, which I can't quite
How does it
see in poetry.
Actually, it's not an obsession, but it did. I remember seeing when I was an undergraduate, Pauline Kael ran the local movie house, and the first time I went in there, I think I saw Pudovkin's Mother in the Last Days of St. Petersburg, which blew me away. And it was very amazing. And the next time I went with these upper division friends, I didn't even know what was playing, and it turned out to be Gold Diggers of 1933. And with no preparation. Ruby Keeler come out dressed in quarters singing We're in the Money in Pig Latin. Makes you feel like you're in another universe altogether. And it made me kind of fall in love with, I mean, it was that particular period. I remember going to at the Surf Theater in San Francisco, when they used to have sneak previews. And the movie that was playing was Padre Panchali, which I had never heard of, which is surely one of the greatest movies ever made. And the sneak preview was a Swedish film called The Seventh Seal. So I saw those two films on the same night when I was 19 years old. So I had this idea of what movies were, and I decided to despise all of my previous taste in movies. And then I saw Gold Diggers of 1933 and thought, no, it's okay, I'm right. This is quite wonderful stuff. So, but how, I don't know, except to free your imagination or to connect you to a world of imagination you want to be connected to. I don't know, in terms of the way I found my way to poetry. Certainly song would be much closer than film to that. American film in your childhood?
The only two films I remember seeing as a kid in Sri Lanka before I was 11, one was Scaramouche, which has a huge influence on me.
Stuart Granger
and Mel Ferrer and the gang. and The Four Feathers, you know, A.E.W. Mason's novel.
That was
You saw
on
it last night?
Yeah, I watched some of it last night.
And what happened to me was I then went and read the book, so it was perfect. You know, someone says, "Oh, the English Patient," it was a film, and now it's a book. That's exactly what happened to me. You know, so it was, and I became much more interested I had the basic Ralph Richardson scene in the book, and you know, I became fascinated by it. So I think film and then the book was kind of an interesting thing for me.
Well, I have a question that I've always wanted to ask you about film, which is I don't know what exactly the question is. My favorite part of The English Patient, the novel, which is one of my favorite books, is the training of Kip to become a bomb diffuser, which is not in the film at all.
Right.
And one of my favorite parts in the film is a great scene with the viewing the art. It's in the book, but it's in the book in a very
it's an old man
reduced
going up,
sort of form. It's not.
Yeah.
What does that say? Do you think about the difference between film and
Well, I mean,
novels?
I know that when Anthony and Saul Zass were going to do the film, I thought the one scene that I know will work is Kip training in England, you know, and that Anthony wrote some of those scenes actually. In fact, wrote some very wonderful scenes where they go to see Peter Pan and there's a ticking, you know, thing in the
clock and the crocodile.
And the crocodile, and, you know, Kip kind of thinks it's a bomb and some of that. But what was interesting was what you learn is about film is that, you know, this is something in the past. So we know Kip's alive right now. So where's the tension in that? You know, where's the tension having a flashback to when he was training, when something could have happened and he could have been killed? So you have to kind of update or make the bomb sequences, the diffusing sequences in the present to make it dramatic.
Right.
And then the scene with looking at the art was very interesting for me because in the book it's an old man who's going up, being pulled up by Kip, and of course, and this is like a great first date with Julie Panache.
Right.
What was interesting for me was when I was reading from the book once in Colorado, and an art authority came up to me and said, "You know, those murals, those frescoes are kind of that moment you have where he's looking at something or other, said, that is only about 3 feet off the ground." And I said, "Oh, really?" So when they did the film, of course, they put that, you know, high up. And I kept seeing this, I kept wanting to go and meet this guy who's having a breakdown because he was wrong, because, you know. But I mean, Walter is the one who, because a lot of Walter's, you know, decisions about scenes like that were kind of, he and Anthony decided on all of that. What works and what doesn't work, you know, in film. But, sorry.
What about your experience with scenes in your own books?
In film? Well, I know movies have had a huge influence on my writing, and I sometimes try to struggle against the impulse. And a lot of times when I'm stuck and if I have a character in a kind of a jam of some kind, I find myself conceiving of that jam in very movie-ish terms, and then often the solution to that problem offers itself to me in a movie term. So like in Wonder Boys, my novel Wonder Boys, these two characters come to rescue a third character to liberate him from his parents' house. He's like living in their basement, and they decided that's not a healthy situation. That's maybe too healthy of a situation. They want to introduce him to a much more unhealthy situation. So they're going to kidnap him, and they need to fool his parents into thinking he's still there. So, and my idea, the solution I came up with is they happen to have a dead dog with them in the trunk of their car, and they take the dead dog and put it in the bed and cover the dog up with the blanket so that it looks like, you know, there's still a person sleeping in the bed if you just came down the stairs and took a glance. And that strikes me now when I think about it, like it's very movie-esque kind of solution to that problem. And I'm not sure anyone's ever really done that in real life.
But the thing is, in a book, you have so much more time to kind of then do all the little details of the kind of blanket it is and the threads of the sheets and all this stuff. And I think that's one of the great delights in writing is that you can go in this whole area where a film can do things a book can never do, and vice versa. So I think it's really interesting. When you're writing a book, you're writing something that, in a way, is almost anti-film. It can't be filmed in some odd way. Maybe it's not a healthy thing, but I think that's true.
You can slow it down. I mean, Poe, in Narrative of Arthur Gordon Pym, I think he's credited with having maybe not invented this technique, but he just ladles tons of factual information into this narrative because he knows he's getting to this crazier and crazier stuff that he's going to say is happening with people with black teeth and giant white figures looming in the Antarctic mists. And so he keeps giving you these very accurate details of life on board a ship and how you stow things under the deck. And I think that can be a real pleasure of writing, is when you get to those moments where you have to sort of forge your expertise. You have to pass yourself off in a way as a fraudulent expert on the subject of stowing things in a ship or whatever it might be.
Another word on this, because I think of my wife, Brenda, who is one of my favorite poet, and I think of a very pure poet. When we were first going out, I said to her, we kept wanting to go to the movies, and we would fall into conversation and start talking. We never got to the movies, and then at a certain point she said to me, I don't actually like movies. And I had never met anyone who didn't like movies, and I said, why not? And she said, I resent their advantage.
Yeah, exactly.
And then later the description was of seeing a movie in Tucson, Arizona when she was a child, and coming out at the end of the movie, a matinee, into the daylight, and finding it absolutely unbearable. She said she sobbed for days because life wasn't that movie, and she didn't even remember what. And then you did remember what movie it was. It was Doris Day in It Happened to Jane. So you can have life-changing experiences based on all. We watched it recently.
Oh, really?
But that's another thing I think about for writers, maybe it's especially true for poets, but about the power of movies and the power of music, that then there's your own voice up against all that enormous projected pleasure and power.
I think the other art form that's, for me, very interesting is art and painting. I mean, for me, when I was writing In the Skin of a Lion, Diego Rivera's murals were tremendously important because I'm in Detroit, where you have a huge mural, and the guy's holding up a wrench like this, and at the other end of the room there's a guy holding up a pencil, almost exactly the same gesture. And I thought, okay, gesture, and this is one way to structure a novel, as much as the Jane Austen novel plan. I think that, and I think the genre of painting and art and collage, has been very important to me as well. If I could steal a painting, I would steal a Kurt Schwitter's collage. And just the art of putting a blue piece of paper next to a yellow piece of paper, and at the same time making the blue piece of paper thick and rough, and the other one is smooth, and whatever it is, or what Rauschenberg does. I think that's, to me, the kind of the genre that fascinates me most, and I would almost want to that would be my role model in some way, more than a film, because a film is, that there's a time limit, first of all, and here you've got dealing with space. But I don't know.
Art?
I mean, I love art, but I am puzzled by. I have a sense of puzzlement when I look at it. When I try to imagine having done it, making it. Like, I know there's that great Frank O'Hara poem, "Why I Am Not a Painter," right? And just that when you talk about leaving things out, I feel like there's a whole different set of things that get left out that I don't get somehow when I look at, say, especially the work of like a contemporary 20th century non-figurative kind of painting. I think I'm so strongly pulled by narrative something has to have a very strong narrative, an almost obvious narrative for me to feel like it's sparking me to want to try to do the same kind of thing myself.
Well, I think the whole idea of erasing what's not essential. I mean, actually, film does that too. Obviously, you know, a film also, when you edit a film, you are erasing what's you wrote and had acted out, but you could remove that key scene, and it's probably better and more suggestive if you don't have it.
I mean, I think that's what you're so great at. That's the thing I try to learn when I read your books is what I think the art of leaving things out is one of the arts that you're the master of, and I feel like I'm just constantly putting too much in and then resisting the idea of taking it back out again, even though I should.
Well,
I wish I could.
I get into trouble, of course, as well.
There's putting in and what you put in. Michael and I have a common friend, Michael Redfern, who is the editor of Brick, a literary magazine that Michael and his wife, Linda Spalding, started, that you should all subscribe to. It's just the best, most interesting, most entertaining literary magazine in North America. And we have a friend who's a half-Dutch poet who wrote to me the other day and said that she had been talking to Michael because she was in Amsterdam looking at Van Gogh's early drawings. And Michael said, oh, he had seen the early drawings with the curator at the Van Gogh Museum in Amsterdam, who said that Van Gogh, with his early black and white, with his pencil drawings, he hated the shininess of the carbon surface of them, and he discovered that the best way to get rid of it was to dip them all in milk. And so Michael said that he was taken and shown the originals, and that you could see the dried milk on the surface of the drawings. And our poet friend said, I loved that someone whose name had the word red in it was explaining these black and white drawings of Van Gogh. And I thought, that's a poet's completely oblique and useless way of seeing things. Yeah. So there's the question of what you take out and what you put in, and then what you put it in, which is yet another. Yeah. I'm thinking that maybe, because dinner is waiting, we should have a few minutes for questions from the audience.
As writers, I'm always curious about the technical things that are in the book that you need to research, like you were saying, being a stowaway on a boat and all of the things that happen on a boat. I'm just wondering how much time it takes to prepare just the information that you want to impart in the novel, all the details. How involved is all of that?
Well, it can be as involved as you'll let it get. I mean, doing research is so much more fun than writing. And there's always more that you could learn, and the thing about research is it's totally self-justifying in the sense that you always do find out cool stuff. So it's never like it's never a waste of time in the sense you're always making discoveries, and so you can always justify it to yourself and say, hey, last time I went to the library I found a lot of good things, so I should do that again, or spend 3 hours on the web trying to track down what kind of valve was used in Messerschmitt fighter planes or something like that. So I mean, the important thing, the hard thing can be is to realize when it's time to start making stuff up and to give yourself the license to invent, like I needed, in the Antarctic section of Cavalier and Clay, I needed my character to serve in a theater of World War II that had not been trodden on by so many great writers before me, that I just felt arriving there that, European theater, Japanese theater, the Pacific theater, the Italian theater had all been written about by so many great writers. There were no theaters left for me. And then I was doing some research about Antarctica, and I found out there was this U.S. Navy expedition in 1941, just before Pearl Harbor. They sent an expedition down there, and it just, clicked. Like, that's it, I'll have the Antarctic theater of war. They were worried about German expansion. I found out just enough plausible stuff. There was a Nazi German presence on on the ice. So I had just enough, and then I tried to make sure there was no actual theater, Antarctic theater, and when it seemed like there was not, that was the moment when I was free to just start making stuff up. So, and that was one of my favorite things I've ever written, is that section of that book where I just was like, okay, they have this many guys and this many Quonset huts, and I sort of hoovered up a whole bunch of information about Antarctica, and then just used what I needed. But you do have to give yourself that license. I think Michael was alluding to it earlier.
Yeah, I can prefer writing to research, quite honestly. And if I do research, I don't really do it first and then write the scene, because I think by that point, for me anyway, I'd get a bit, if I know what the structure is or what the details are, then there isn't that kind of magic of discovering or inventing something. So I usually kind of write the book while I'm doing the research simultaneously. So in The Skin of a Lion, the book there's a whole scene about building a bridge, and I was sort of learning about the bridge building while I was writing the scene, and it gave it the kind of energy and tension. And I think Michael's right. I think you can paint yourself into a corner with too much research. You know, I've always found that the scene that kind of opens it out for me is something's missing. You know, I can't find information about a certain photographer in Toronto in 1913, and so I have to invent him. And that's always the best part, you know, of possibly the best part of the book. So and often that what's missing is what allows you to kind of take a leap, I think.
I think the dangerous moment is, as a writer, is when you hear yourself saying, oh, I wish I could have my character do this or that, but there was no such thing at the time, so I just can't. And that's when you know you're a slave to the research, and it's time, like, you can just say, yes, there was, and this is what it was like, and just start making it up. And that's when you start to feel like the facts are inhibiting you from telling the story that you're trying to tell. You've done too much research.
A strange thing happened to me the other day. I was working on something, and I, you know, I write my little notes to the side, often saying perhaps this scene should go earlier or later or something like that. And I found myself writing, perhaps we should. We? Who's we? You know? And it was almost like suddenly there was a director and a lighting man and a sound man, and I thought, wait a minute, that's just me. But you really do believe that, you know, a writer has all these other kind of professions on the side, you know, bringing the guy who can do the plumbing and, you know, so forth. It's very odd.
One advantage of poetry is you can just say, I really wish that there were golden trout in the Sierra Nevada in this period, because that's the fish I would like the person to catch right here, but you can just do it.
Yeah.
I think it's one more question, and then I think maybe dinner.
I wanted to ask Michael Ondaatje, is the poet real in Visidero, or did you make him up, the French poet?
I made him up.
Yeah. I couldn't find him in Google.
Some enterprising French poet may find a way to get into business, however.
You want to do it? Hey, he's got to have one.
I gasped when you mentioned the Four Feathers, because I think Bob also, when I got home last night late, there it was on TCM. I think they've been playing movies of British imperialism in Africa or something. They had Khartoum a few weeks ago. It's just a fantastic, brutal, amazing movie, I thought. And I'm curious what it was like seeing this old Zoltan Korda vehicle of British imperialism, watching it in Sri Lanka as a little boy.
Yeah, I don't remember what kind of influence it had on me. I think I saw it again. In fact, it's an interesting film because when they are going off to the docks and marching all of the bands, it is very ironic, you know. And of course, you love the guy who's a coward, you know. And so it's,
he remakes his own life.
Yeah, yeah.
The artist.
But you know, all of those movies are movies for boys. What? They're the male toolkit. like in the way that Iliad, the Odyssey, how you're supposed to behave in the world. I mean, that whole movies were the instruction manual, right, for how to do it. Still are. We need to finish and go to dinner. If you're not sated with the art of fiction, the lectures of Neruda Farah will be happening all During April, Story Hour will be happening here and will be broadcast. It's an enormous gift of this library to all of us. So thank you, Michaels, and thank you, Dave and Tom.